The ballad of the MS al-Salam Boccaccio 98 stands as a haunting tale of maritime transportation. It was a vessel whose tragic fate would become one of the most devastating maritime disasters in modern history. Originally constructed in 1970 in Monfalcone, Italy, the ship began its life as a domestic ferry, serving Italian routes before undergoing significant modifications and eventually being sold to Egyptian ownership. Its final voyage on February 2nd and 3rd, 2006, in the unforgiving waters of the Red Sea, would result in the loss of over 1,000 lives, exposing critical systemic failures in ship design, crew management, emergency protocols, and maritime safety regulations. More than just a maritime accident, the story of the al-Salam Boccaccio 98 represents a profound narrative of human error, technological limitations, and the catastrophic consequences that can emerge when multiple layers of safety infrastructure simultaneously break down. From Maritime Mishaps, here is that story. The maritime vessel, initially designated as Boccaccio, emerged from the shipyards of Italcantieri in Monfalcone, Italy, during 1970. Created under contract for Tirrenia di Navigazione, a government-controlled maritime enterprise, the ship was engineered specifically for domestic Italian transportation routes. With impressive dimensions spanning 430 feet in length, a 77.5-foot width, and an 18-foot draft, the vessel was configured to transport 1,000 passengers alongside 200 vehicles. Powered by robust engines, generating 16,500 kilowatts, the ship demonstrated impressive mobility, reaching velocities of 19 knots, equivalent to approximately 22 miles per hour. It represented one of 5 companion vessels in its class, which Tirrenia affectionately labeled the Poets, due to their namesakes drawn from renowned Italian literary figures. Throughout nearly 30 years, Boccaccio predominantly serviced maritime routes connecting mainland Italy with Sardinia. In 1991, the vessel, together with sister ships Carducci, Manzoni, Pascoli, and Petrarca, underwent substantial reconstruction at the INMA shipyard in La Spezia, Italy. Technicians expanded passenger capacity by adding 4 supplementary upper decks, which dramatically transformed the ship's architectural profile. While the fundamental dimensions remained consistent, the reconstruction elevated the superstructure and increased the draft to 19.5 feet. These modifications enhanced the vessel's capacity, enabling transportation of 320 vehicles and 1,300 passengers. Concurrently, its gross tonnage was updated to about 11,800 GT. Maritime specialists subsequently suggested that these structural alterations potentially introduced significant vulnerabilities. During 1999, the ship transferred ownership to Al-Salam Maritime Transport, Egypt's most substantial private shipping organization, headquartered in Cairo. Subsequent to the sale, the vessel received a new designation, al-Salam Boccaccio 98, and was registered through Pacific Sunlight Marine, a Panamanian corporate entity. Occasionally, the ship was simply referred to as Salam 98. Ominous indications of potential risks had already manifested. In 2002, a companion vessel, al-Salam Petrarca 90, experienced a devastating fire while navigating the Red Sea near Saudi Arabia's Dibba port. The incident resulted in the ship capsizing during rescue attempts, causing 1 sailor's death and injuring 10 additional crew members. Remarkably, this warning failed to prompt comprehensive safety reviews or enhanced regulatory oversight, inadvertently establishing conditions for future maritime disasters. Unfortunately for everyone involved, these future maritime disasters weren't all that far into the future and would ultimately change the landscape of maritime travel across the entire Egyptian sector at large. The al-Salam 98's final recorded geographical location was situated roughly 100 kilometers from Dubai, Saudi Arabia, where communication with coastal authorities abruptly terminated around 10 p.m. local time. Survivors recounted observing smoke emerging from the engine compartment, accompanied by an unrelenting fire. Eyewitness testimonies suggested the vessel had begun listing immediately after departing its initial port. Nonetheless, the ship continued its journey for several hours until the angle became critically dangerous, ultimately capsizing within a brief 10-minute window as crew members frantically battled the expanding conflagration. An Egyptian ministerial representative, speaking during a BBC radio interview, explained that the fire originally ignited in a storage compartment. Although initially appearing to be controlled, the blaze subsequently reignited. Crew members hypothesized that their firefighting techniques inadvertently exacerbated the situation. Seawater deployed to extinguish the flames collected within the vessel's hull due to non-functional drainage mechanisms created a perilous weight distribution that significantly contributed to the ship's eventual submersion. The Red Sea's unforgiving environmental characteristics undoubtedly influenced the disaster's progression. The maritime region was renowned for its turbulent wind patterns and intricate current systems, which were further intensified by concurrent high winds and dust storm activity. These meteorological conditions potentially not only compromised the vessel's stability, but also substantially complicated rescue intervention efforts. Meteorological documentation from the nearby container vessel, MV Glasgow Maersk, provided crucial contextual information about the environmental conditions. At midnight on February 3, 2006, positioned approximately 150 kilometers north-northwest of the incident site, the ship's instruments recorded northwest winds blowing at 24 knots. The sea's surface temperature registered at 25 degrees Celsius, with wave heights measuring a modest 45 centimeters. Despite relatively good visibility extending 10 kilometers, satellite imagery confirmed an active weather system traversing the regional atmosphere. According to Mamdouh Ismail, leader of the al-Salam Maritime Transport Company, the vessel transported 1,312 passengers and 96 crew members. However, official reports exhibited slight discrepancies. An earlier Egyptian governmental statement referenced 1,310 passengers and 105 crew members, while the presidential spokesman mentioned just 98 crew members, and the transport minister documented 104 crew personnel. Numerous hypothetical explanations surfaced in the maritime disaster's aftermath, attempting to decipher the potential causes of the tragic incident. One prominent hypothesis focused on the onboard fire. Multiple survivors described observing an extensive blaze, with testimonies highlighting dense black smoke emerging from the engine compartment. This conflagration potentially represented a critical element in the vessel's ultimate destruction. Another potential explanation centered on the ship's architectural design. The al-Salam Boccaccio 98 functioned as a roll-on, roll-off ferry, characterized by vehicle compartments extending the vessel's entire length, enabling automotive transportation without requiring reversal maneuvers. However, this configuration introduced significant structural vulnerabilities. The vehicle bay doors, positioned near the waterline, could potentially permit water infiltration if inadequately sealed. Even minimal water movement within the cargo area could generate a destabilizing force, referred to as the free surface effect, which could precipitate rapid capsizing. The vessel's historical structural transformation also attracted investigative scrutiny. During the 1980s, substantial modifications occurred, including the integration of 2 additional passenger decks and cargo area expansions. These alterations potentially exceeded the ship's original stability parameters, particularly considering its relatively shallow draft of 5.9 meters. When combined with the Red Sea's intense wind conditions, these modifications might have rendered the tall, top-heavy vessel exceptionally susceptible to capsizing. An alternative theory proposed that the ship's rolling motion could have caused vehicular cargo to become unanchored. Potential collisions between loose vehicles and the hull might have created punctures, allowing more seawater to infiltrate rapidly and overwhelm the maritime structure. An automatic distress transmission was intercepted by the Air Sea Rescue Control Center at RAF Kinloss in Scotland at 11:58 p.m. UTC on February 2, 2006. The satellite-relayed signal precisely located the ship's position and was promptly communicated to Egyptian authorities through French intermediaries. Rescue operations commenced on February 3rd, with lifeboats and human remains observed floating across the water's surface. Initial efforts resulted in at least 314 survivors being recovered, with approximately 185 bodies retrieved. Reuters reports noted dozens of bodies drifting within the Red Sea. Search and rescue missions mobilized diverse resources, including Egyptian naval frigates, helicopters, and Italian coastal patrol vessels. These teams navigated treacherous meteorological conditions, conducting extensive search operations spanning over 90 hours. 8 individuals were successfully rescued by Italian Esploratore-class patrol vessels, Vendetta and Sentinella. The British Royal Navy redirected the warship HMS Bulwark towards the incident site, though conflicting accounts emerged regarding its ultimate participation. Israel reportedly offered naval search and rescue assistance, which Egyptian authorities declined. Conversely, Egypt accepted support from the United States, which dispatched a P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft after initially suggesting no additional assistance was required. Survivors recounted traumatic scenes characterized by overwhelming chaos and profound despair. Many testimonies alleged that the ship's captain was among the first to abandon the vessel, escaping via lifeboat, while hundreds of passengers remained stranded amid the unfolding catastrophe. While the theories surrounding the sinking of MS al-Salam Boccaccio 98 were close enough to the truth, various entities took up detailed investigations to get to the bottom of such a tragic maritime ordeal. The country of Panama's conclusive investigation into the Salam 98 tragedy unveiled a complex network of systemic failures that culminated in one of the most devastating maritime catastrophes of contemporary times. The comprehensive analysis determined that the disaster originated from a lethal combination of human misjudgments, architectural weaknesses, and fundamental design shortcomings. This catastrophic sequence initiated with a fire erupting on the vehicle deck, reportedly originating within a luggage-laden trailer. Although the fire alarm triggered early during the voyage, the crew's response remained sluggish and disorganized. As the blaze expanded, dense smoke saturated the vessel's interior, dramatically reducing visibility and obstructing firefighting efforts. This initial fire represented merely the first in a series of critical events, ultimately leading to the ship's destruction. One of the most pivotal factors contributing to the tragedy was the accumulation of water deployed during firefighting operations. With ineffective drainage through the ship's scuppers, water remained stagnant on the vehicle deck, progressively destabilizing the vessel. Deteriorating meteorological conditions and powerful winds further intensified the precarious situation. The ship developed a hazardous starboard tilt, and the crew's attempts to counterbalance through ballast water adjustments actually made the problem worse. As water continued pooling and shifting across the vehicle deck, the vessel's stability catastrophically disintegrated, resulting in a complete capsizing. The investigation illuminated multiple systemic vulnerabilities. Paramount among these were the inherent design flaws characteristic of the aforementioned roll-on, roll-off, frequently referred to as ro-ro, ferry structures. The open vehicle deck configuration, while facilitating easy vehicular entry and exit, simultaneously rendered the vessel susceptible to the free surface effect, the phenomenon we mentioned, where uncontrolled water movement across the deck generates significant instability. These vulnerabilities were further compounded by extensive modifications implemented throughout the ship's operational history, including additional passenger decks and cargo area transformations that likely surpassed the vessel's original design parameters. Human error emerged as the other critical component. The crew's mismanagement of firefighting procedures, failure to efficiently drain accumulated water, and inappropriate ballast adjustment techniques significantly contributed to the sinking. Moreover, the crew's delayed evacuation protocol left passengers woefully unprepared for the rapidly escalating emergency. The investigation additionally highlighted deficiencies within the ship's safety infrastructure. Firefighting and drainage equipment proved manifestly inadequate for managing such complex emergencies, and the vessel's architectural design flaws provided minimal margin for error during these types of critical situations. The investigation's conclusions urgently advocated for comprehensive reforms to international safety standards governing ro-ro passenger ships, alongside more rigorous enforcement of vessel design and safety protocols. These recommendations sought to prevent future tragedies by addressing both structural vulnerabilities and human operational factors in maritime safety. The official Egypt investigation report provides a detailed minute-by-minute account of the accident that largely corroborates and adds precise technical details to the previous narrative. The report confirmed several key details, including the passenger and crew count of 1,310 passengers and 96 crew members, the fire's origin and luggage stored on an open trailer, the initial fire alarm sounding at 7:10 p.m. with the car deck reported full of smoke, and the vessel's capsizing at 11:33 p.m. after a progressive list to starboard. It all started at 7:14 p.m. when the car drencher system was activated and water was discharged onto the car deck. By 7:59, car deck scuppers were reported blocked, and at 8:08 p.m., the fire source was confirmed in trailer luggage. The vessel first listed to 7 degrees starboard at 9:04, and by 11:30, the list had increased to 25 degrees, prompting a mayday signal before the final capsizing at 11:33 p.m. The report identified multiple contributing factors to the disaster. These included the aforementioned fire outbreak and delayed reporting, the accumulated drencher system water on the car deck, blocked scuppers preventing water drainage, potential scupper valve design issues, and the inability of scuppers to discharge water when the vessel listed more than 6.5 degrees. Critical human factor issues compounded these technical problems, with emergency procedures not being followed, no timely abandoned ship order issued, the crew failing to extinguish the fire, and missed opportunities to seek help from nearby ships. Systemic failures were also extensively documented. These included inconsistent passenger safety certificates, an incomplete stability booklet that failed to account for sidewind and crowd movement, a lack of damage stability documentation, and an ineffective search and rescue system in the Red Sea. Additionally, the investigation uncovered a possible conflict of interest in vessel management. Overall, the investigation report provided a more technical and granular account of the disaster, emphasizing the systemic failures that extended far beyond the immediate physical circumstances of the sinking. It painted a comprehensive picture of how multiple layers of failure, technical, human, and organizational, can culminate in a catastrophic maritime disaster. May those who perished on the sinking of the MS al-Salam Boccaccio 98 rest in peace, and the victims' families find peace in the aftermath of such an unthinkable tragedy.